walking along in Tel Aviv. Welcome. We're here today to talk about the subject of residency. What is residency all about? When we talk about it for tax purposes, residency is quite simple. It's whose tax rules apply. Okay, so for example, if I'm Canadian resident, then Canada's tax rules apply to all of my income. Very simple, right? Look at this. Very nice city, actually. Quite pleasantly surprised to be here. Anyway, so basically there's kind of three different areas of residency we need to talk about. I talk about this all the time. The first is you have, of course, your personal residency, right? Your personal residency is going to affect you in terms of what personal tax you have to pay, but also potentially the application of other rules, such as CFC rules, to your business. Okay, so it's fairly far-reaching out there. Got some cool street art here. And so that's the first thing. Now, personal residency is not legal residency. In other words, you could be legally allowed to live somewhere and not be tax resident there. Same thing, you could be tax resident somewhere and be an illegal immigrant, right? So kind of, I don't know, in a funny sense, people get, you know, if you're like, say you were somebody who immigrated illegally to the US, you're staying there, overstayed your visa, they actually expect you to pay tax. Even though you're not allowed to be there, even though they're going to deport you, they do expect you to pay tax, which is quite interesting. The second thing is that just because you don't qualify under a particular residency rule doesn't mean you're non-resident. So, we're in a construction zone here. So, for example, a lot of people will throw around this 183-day rule. They'll say, oh, you know, I'm not in the country for 183 days. Well, 183 days makes you resident in most places, but not spending 183 days usually doesn't make you non-resident. So, you got to be really careful about those rules. Likewise, you could be in a situation where you could be double resident or double non-resident. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they're going and getting a residency in maybe Panama or UAE. They say, oh, they only require I spend a day there. Well, that's great from the perspective of that country, but it's not necessarily good from the perspective of taxes in your home country. So your home country might not consider you resident there and still tax you. So you got to be really careful. So hence, you know, if you're unclear about it, you can contact us, but be very careful. Next is your corporate residency. Again, the big difference that I see people make a mistake on all the time is they screw up the difference between corporate registration and corporate residency, okay? So, for example, people come to me and they say, hey, I have Belize Seychelles, is it good? And the thing is, it doesn't matter where you form the company. That doesn't necessarily determine where it's resident. Now, it could, it matters. So, for example, if I form a company in Canada, Canada will consider it tax resident there. But Canada will also consider a company tax resident if your company is managed and controlled from Canada. So, there's kind of three different things you have to watch out for, depending on what's going on. The first is where the company is registered. Second is where it's managed and controlled. And the third is where do they have their main office. So these things are all potentially important, okay? And then the third thing that can come on is the residency of the income, but we're going to talk about that in a future video. So bottom line is residency is super simple. It's whose tax rules apply to your overall income. And it doesn't mean you're going to pay tax, but it does mean that their rules apply to you. If you're not resident somewhere, their rules don't apply at all. Except for if your income is resident there. So then if you are resident there, you're entirely under their rules regardless. And this makes a lot of sense, right? They can't enforce it if you're not resident, and therefore how can they go after you? So it's the core principle that we talk about when it comes to taxation, international tax, and it's what you have most need to pay attention to. So again, if you have questions about it, contact us. That's that. I'm going to go to Jerusalem.